Hi guys, I'm going to show you the CS2 video settings for best FPS possible. Let's go straight into it. Boost player contrast. This is more personal preference because it barely impacts your FPS. I feel like in CS2 you can already see enemy models good enough when it's disabled, but if you want to have that additional kind of outline, enable this. Vertical sync. You want to put this to disabled. If it's enabled, then your frame rate will get capped to 60 FPS. Only enable this if you have really bad hardware and barely do make it to 60 FPS. You will have more input lag, but the game will be smoother. Anti-aliasing. You will save most FPS when it's disabled, but if you do prefer to play with it enabled, keep in mind you will lose about 10-20 FPS average or maybe a tiny bit more depending on the setting. If you play on a low resolution, then it helps to give more picture clarity, but it's not really needed when you play native, for example. Global shadow quality. You will obviously get most FPS when this is set to low, but in order to have the advantage and see enemy shadows behind corners, you need to have it on high. It's basically disabled on low and medium setting. If you do need the most FPS, keep it on low though. Model and texture detail. Between the low and high setting, you will lose around 10 FPS average. If you have it on low, your skins or artworks will look bad and blurry. So if you care about that, set it to medium or high. Otherwise, keep it on low for best FPS. Texture filtering mode. This is mostly personal preference. It barely makes a difference in FPS. A lower setting will have less details on the wall and make textures look blurry, whereas a higher setting will make your wall and ground textures look more clear and crisp, but there will be more visible clutter. I personally have it on the lowest setting. Shader detail is best to keep on low to save a good amount of FPS. The same for particle details. Set ambient occlusion to disabled. It has to do with the glossy reflection on surfaces and saves a good amount of FPS when disabled. High dynamic range. When CS2 came out, you could notice a difference between performance and quality here because performance gave you kind of a noise filter, which was annoying. But now there isn't really a noticeable difference in visibility. So put it on performance for best FPS. Fidelity affects super resolution. You want to put this to disabled. If you set it to performance, it will give you an FPS boost, but your game will look quite bad. If you really need the FPS, you can play with this setting and find a middle ground in visibility and performance, but otherwise, it's best to have it disabled. Depending on if you have an AMD or NVIDIA graphics card, below you will have an additional NVIDIA Reflex low latency setting, which you should enable for the best gameplay experience. If you're still struggling with FPS, you can try to play on a lower resolution to gain additional FPS, but keep in mind it can be that the game might not feel as smooth as it does on, for example, native 1920 by 1080 resolution. Hope I could help. Thanks for watching.